All right, everybody. It says I'm live, and sometimes I'm just not. So let me know if you can hear me and see me, preferably both, but more importantly, hear me. And welcome to another Monday night where we can actually discuss some of the events that are occurring around the world as well as here at home, and how this expansion of SHTF is just part of the deal at this point in time. Okay, so let's get things rolling. I see everybody checking in. We've got Jet checking in with the 308 by Hot Chocolate Chip Cookies, and I can appreciate that because I like both of those things, actually. Harbor Prepper says 5x5. Scott B says 5x5 as well. And heating up at the Texas border, says Scott B. And yeah, we're going to talk about that tonight in all honesty. My snow was melting, Grisio Nemo, but unfortunately, we are now back to more snow, which just happened today. So I'm very excited about that. Now, before we get going, I'll let everybody pile in. But first and foremost, I got to thank Midway USA for being the biggest supporter of the channel. And of course, they may or may not have some decent deals going on right now when it comes to some of their MRE offerings. So make sure you check that out. And a big thanks to Midway USA for always helping me out. And then I do want to mention that Genesis Gold Group also sponsors the live streams on this channel. And of course, if you want to go to magicpreppergold.com, they can help you out when it comes to rolling a retirement account over into a gold-backed IRA, or they can even send you precious metals right to your front door, depending on quantity and everything else related to that. And just so you're aware, the way their gold-backed IRAs work is that you have a safety deposit box that's actually filled with precious metals that you have access to personally. It's not something that just exists in zeros and ones. It's a physical asset you actually own. So magicpeppergold.com, Genesis Gold Group can definitely help you out if that's something you want to stabilize some of your wealth with. And of course, I'll just put the link in the live chat for you. And there'll be a link in the description as well as in the pinned comment. And we have some stuff to talk about tonight. So it looks like everybody's in. Jeffrey Linquist says, I love Midway. That's awesome. They definitely helped me out a lot. Jeffrey Starnes says 5x5. I think it sounds like we are good to go. Michael White, hey, are you going to talk about the border? I sure am, Michael White. I definitely am, because it is something happening here in this country, and it's something that we have to very much so pay attention to, because it's probably going to affect us most directly before anything else that we're going to discuss tonight. But we still have to be aware of what's happening in other parts of the world, because it could expand further and cause more issues that we would then experience ourselves. So let's get things rolling. First and foremost, the operations occurring down in the Red Sea based on what's happening from the Yemeni Houthis are being named at this point in time, which means that we are moving into a more organized phase of this special operation. And before we jump into this article, and this is from CNN, but you know, they were one of the first ones to put some of this information out. So all I want to say is, we're calling these things special operations. And don't forget that that's exactly what Russia used the nomenclature for when in regards to their invasion of Ukraine. It was a special operation, right? So they don't want to call these things what they actually are, because it could create a hysteria, it could create panic. And for them, the panic they're most concerned about isn't the panic experienced by the average person if there's a rush on, you know, the grocery store, or a rush on medicines, or who knows what else. They're concerned about the panic in the markets. They're concerned about their donors and the people who they associate with losing lots of zeros from the end of their bank accounts. So keep that in mind, but this is now a special operation, just like the invasion of Ukraine was considered a special operation. U.S. and U.K. carry out additional strikes against Houthi targets in Yemen. The U.S. and U.K. carried out additional strikes against Houthi targets in Yemen on Monday, marking the 8th round of attacks by the U.S. military on the rebels' infrastructure in just over 10 days, two defense officials told CNN. And look, I'm not a fan of CNN, but I will tell you that lately it seems like they put out more relevant information regarding some of this stuff than some of the other major players like Fox and stuff. So I don't know what that's about, but you can speculate on that all you want. This is just where I'm getting this info from for this particular story. The U.S. and U.K. struck fewer than 10 sites, a third defense official said, a smaller number than the first joint operation on January 11th that struck over 30 Houthi targets. The U.S. deployed fighter aircraft from the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower aircraft carrier as part of the strikes. President Joe Biden spoke to his British counterpart, U.K. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, on Monday, the White House said earlier in the day, about a range of topics, including security in the Red Sea. And this is expanding and getting worse, and we'll jump into that here in just a minute. CNN reported on Monday that the U.S. has named the ongoing operation to target Houthi assets in Yemen Operation Poseidon Archer, suggesting a more organized and potentially long-term approach to the operations in Yemen that have been aimed at deterring the Iranian-backed group from attacking commercial vessels in the Red Sea. So now you can see that they are anticipating this to last for longer, and we're at the point now where it's actually been given an operational name, which should tell you that there's an expectation that these actions are going to continue. The U.S. has now struck Houthi targets in Yemen 8 times since January 11th, the majority of which the U.S. military has carried out unilaterally. The first wave of strikes, in which the U.S. and U.K. hit approximately 30 sites across Houthi-controlled Yemen, marked the beginning of Operation Poseidon Archer, one official said. So we have an official operation occurring in the Red Sea at this point in time, where airstrikes are being taken out on a foreign country, right? So this is not what you want to see happening. We want to see de-escalation, and instead we're just seeing increasing activity. Iran's role, and this is just something to keep in mind as we move forward in the rest of tonight's conversation. Iran has been quietly fueling the attacks, U.S. officials have said, and that's a very important part of this sentence structure right here. They had to make sure you are aware that U.S. officials are saying this. So you should probably look at that as some form of telegraphing that Iran is being pointed to now as the bad guy. And in fact, as we go through some of the other information tonight, you'll see that Iran in many ways has become the new boogeyman, more so than even Russia. And in fact, now Iran is the big problem that the world has, even though Russia is in the middle of an armed conflict and invasion of another country. We can kind of see where Western influence and Western interest is starting to head to, and I think we all know why, but let's keep moving on. Okay, Iran has been quietly fueling the attacks, U.S. officials have said, enabling and supporting its proxy groups across the region. Tehran has been supplying the Houthis with tactical intelligence and weapons to help them target ships in the Red Sea, CNN previously reported. Iran has also continued to supply its proxy groups in Iraq and Syria, where U.S. and coalition forces have come under attack over 150 times since October 17th. On Saturday, Iranian proxy militias launched one of their largest ballistic missile attacks since October on Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq, leaving 2 U.S. service members with traumatic brain injuries, Singh said on Monday. Biden acknowledged on Thursday that the U.S. strikes were not stopping the Houthis, who have continued to target and in some cases hit U.S.-owned commercial vessels operating off the coast of Yemen. But Biden said the U.S. airstrikes would continue anyway, and Singh said on Monday that it would ultimately be up to the Houthis and the Iranian proxy groups when to end their attacks. Singh said last week that the Pentagon's initial assessments are that the airstrikes against the Houthis have been very successful in destroying pretty much all of the targets that we hit, leaving one less missile or capability that the Houthis can then deploy in the Red Sea. The Houthis, and this is the last part we're going to go over for this story, but this is very telling as to where we're heading. The Houthis have said that they won't stop their attacks until the war between Israel and Hamas inside Gaza comes to an end. Houthi leader Abdul Malek al-Houthi said in a speech on Thursday that it is a great honor and blessing to be confronting America directly. So they're a fan of this, right? And that should tell you it's going to continue. They like what's happening right now. It gives them credibility. It builds reputation. It also gives them more political sway when it comes to trying to influence the rest of the region. So just keep all of that in mind, but they want to be at war with us. We're airstriking their facilities, but in reality, they're trying to hit naval ships with ballistic missiles. At some point, they'll probably hit the target. I mean, we have very good defense systems that may not allow that to happen, for all I know. But what I can say is that if the target is finally hit, what does that lead to? Because airstrikes aren't cutting it if we're doing them already, and then the Houthis are able to actually hit one of our ships. Ships always seem to be the leading cause of a much larger conflict, don't they? I mean, we've seen this happen before, but this is where we're at right now. Savage Lee says, collapse of the empire. Well, at minimum, let's hope that maybe it's only a partial collapse, especially based on certain areas that are mismanaged more heavily, but also a repairable collapse, one that we might be able to fix thereafter. I'm not sure, but that's something I'm hoping for. I don't want to see the end of America. I want to see the beginning of America getting back on the right track. So let's see here. Jeffrey Lindquist says, Screaming Eagles. That's right. Mike H. mentioned the Gulf of Tonkin, of course, and that is something that is clearly what I'm referring to when it comes to the ships that are starting larger conflicts. These things happen, but there's many, many other examples of that throughout history. I believe it was the USS Maine that started the Spanish War, I believe. I don't remember for sure. Let me know in the chat if that's the case, but like these things happen. I might have got that wrong. My history is a little, blurry in that regard to the Spanish-American War. Not necessarily the most expertise stored up in here about that one. But let's move forward, okay? Now, I just talked to you about how all that was happening. But here's the thing. Europe is jumping in too. So now we have a named operation in Operation Poseidon Archer. And Europe, or the EU, thinks that it's a good idea and that we should get more involved. What is happening with this website? Wow. Wow. Okay, there we go. Let's just pretend that didn't happen. The EU agrees on Yemen mission, okay? Italy, France, and Germany reportedly want to send warships to the Red Sea. Foreign ministers of the European Union have reached a tentative agreement to start a naval mission in the Red Sea. EU foreign policy head Josep Borrell announced on Monday after a ministerial meeting in Brussels, okay? So the EU wants to get involved. And let's see here. Florida Sheepdog says USS Maine was Havana Harbor, was used as a catalyst for our entry into the Spanish-American War. Okay, yeah. So, and I know a lot of people are saying that maybe it wasn't actually an attack on that ship, but whatever caused the explosion or whatever it was led us into that war. So another example. I'm glad I actually had that one right. So look at that. I can remember things sometimes. All right. So Germany, France, and Italy have proposed the step in response to requests from the Netherlands, whose merchant shipping has been impacted by the months-long Houthi attacks on vessels linked to Israel. We have agreed in principle to start the EU mission in the Red Sea, Borrell said after the meeting, according to the Italian news agency ANSA. We have to work on unanimity as to when it will start. Okay. The European External Action Service aims to have the mission established by February 19th. And start operations soon afterward, Reuters has reported, citing anonymous diplomatic sources in Brussels. So, here's something to consider. The EU is planning this mission to have intervention in the Red Sea, similar to what we're doing right now with the carrier strike groups we have over there. And they're not even going to start it until February 19th. So, when we're reading through these articles or when we're talking about this information, those small details can mean a lot more than what you might assume. That tells you, okay, a month, right? Because that's in about a month from today. So in a month, the EU will finally send ships to the Red Sea, which means they assume there will be a reason to still have to do that, which then they will start their mission once they arrive. So this isn't going to end anytime soon, at least according to what the EU thinks and how they're planning around it, as well as how the US is reacting to a lot of the different activities going on there. So if this doesn't end soon, what does that mean? Well, bare minimum, it means everything gets more expensive because it's hurting the cost of shipping. Cargo costs are going through the roof. So that hurts us when it comes to our economics, and it hurts our ability to prepare because, as we all know, and I'm sure many of you are aware of this, in many ways, prepping is surplus, right? Like it's hard to store food away if you can't afford to eat, right? So you have to be able to afford to eat and afford some excess in order to store it away. That's hard to do if things get more and more and more expensive, which is just what's going to happen as long as there's military activity in the Red Sea. The other thing to keep in mind is that the longer this goes on for and the more countries that get involved, the more likely one of those Gulf of Tonkin or, USS Maine type scenarios occurs. It's just more likely, right? Like we know that the mistakes can happen, and all it takes is one major mistake for a huge conflict to erupt because of said mistake. So, let's see here. Wing It with Ethan says Santa Fe, Texas, SCOTUS screwed us all today is what I assume you meant. And we are going to talk about that tonight because it does have implications domestically and something that I want to keep an eye on because of previous interactions between Texas and the federal government. I think it's worth talking about. But let's move on to kind of keep continuing this conversation about some of the stuff occurring in the Middle East and how it has this level of expansion happening right now. So when I talk about SHTF expansion, what I mean is that like we're already seeing isolated incidents of SHTF in different parts of the world, of course, but those incidents are continually expanding, or so it would seem. And that's what we're witnessing, especially right now in the Middle East. And then we can also see what some of the people who are in charge of, I don't know, like the military industrial complex would like to see happen based on the way that this narrative is changing. And we're going to talk about that here right now. So, Pentagon Insider warns we are on the brink of World War III after latest Iran attack. Now, you guys know my opinion. I know not everybody agrees, and that's totally fine. I believe we're already in World War III. We're just not aware of it yet because we're not in the future to be able to go back and look and say, oh, it started on this day. Because people in World War II weren't necessarily in World War II while World War II was occurring. Like, that's just how these things work. And one thing I wanted to mention that, a lot of people talked about in the previous video I spoke about that whole subject on, was that the United States wasn't even in World War II when World War II started, right? So like there's a lot of back and forth about, well, I won't really think of it as World War III until like we're directly involved with another country in a fight, right? And it's like, well, I get that, but at the same time, like World War II began, 2 years before the U.S. ever got involved? So but guess what we were doing during those 2 years? We were arming our allies and sending military aid to countries and all this other stuff that is just very reminiscent as to like what we're doing, I don't know, right now. So just keep that in mind, okay? But anyway, this person is a Pentagon Insider, and one thing that I like to think about when it comes to articles like this and just their point of view is once this is mainstream, it should concern you, because as preppers and people who want to be ready to respond strategically to events that are occurring, like you should already kind of be in this mindset. Like you already think things are at that level or at least right on the edge, right? So this guy telling you that should let you know that things have moved even further past that point, because this wasn't mainstream per se as far as a year or 2 or 3 ago, right? And now we're talking about it like out in the open, like, yeah, and this guy's from the Pentagon apparently. So a source inside the Pentagon has warned Daily Express US that we are on the brink of World War III amid surging conflict in the Middle East, sparked largely by Iran. Now, remember what I said earlier. Iran is becoming the new boogeyman. We're not hyper-focused on Russia so much anymore, which I find to be concerning because the media obviously has their level of marching orders, let's just say. And so we can see that the focus is changing, which should tell you what is likely to come. The warning comes as Iranian-backed proxies destabilize the Middle East by attacking Israel and U.S. targets as well as international shipping in the region. Iran itself has also carried out strikes in neighboring Iraq and Pakistan, as well as Syria, sending tensions soaring, which has happened. So if you weren't aware of that, Iran has sent missiles into foreign countries based on attacks that they've dealt with within their own borders. This is expansion. I don't know how else to say it. Okay. Defense expert Nicholas Drummond echoed concerns that the conflict in the Middle East could potentially escalate, but warned that if Tehran directly attacked Israel, the ensuing war would be the end of Iran. Keep that in mind, right? We can see where the telegraphing is starting to go. Speaking to Daily Express US, he said Iran's agenda in the region and globally has been exposed, and Iran is on the back foot. The West is saying to Iran, behave yourself or we will attack you directly. I think it's highly possible that if Iran continues to act through proxies or to act directly, that threatens Western interests. We could see military action taken against Iran, and that would be a major conflict in the Middle East. It's unclear whether Iran is prepared to engage in such a conflict, which, according to Mr. Drummond, would spell disaster for the regime in Tehran. He added, I think Iran has to be very, very careful. It has been playing a dangerous game, and it's about to get punished if it doesn't step back. You saw that Iran fired a missile into Syria, and it was ostensibly taken out by rebel targets. Or ostensibly taking out rebel targets, sorry. But it was also demonstrating it has a missile capable of reaching Israel from Iran that could have a nuclear warhead. It could target Tel Aviv. That's the message it's sending. And of course, if Iran did that, it would be the end of Iran, frankly. Mr. Drummond branded Iran as the biggest threat to world peace at the moment. Consider that. Russia, a nuclear superpower, is actively invading Ukraine right now. Like there's still a conflict happening there, and there's still an invasion force within Ukraine. And now we're being told that Iran is actually the biggest threat to world peace right now, while we're dealing with a major, major conflict in Europe. So it just feels like 2001, 2, right? Like it kind of feels like we're pointing the finger to where we're going next, right? I don't know how else to say it. But anyway, the stark assessment of the situation in the Middle East comes as Iranian proxies target the U.S. and Israel in and from Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Lebanon, and elsewhere. In addition, Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen have wrought havoc on international shipping by attacking civilian vessels in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. So don't forget, everything that's happening in that region right now is backed by Iran, right? Hamas is backed by Iran. The Houthis are backed by Iran. Hezbollah is backed by Iran. All of it's happening thanks to Iran. So the other thing to keep in mind is that this guy is saying, like, if Iran attacks Israel, which they demonstrated they can now, basically, that it'll be the end of Iran. But that's not considering the fact that they have close ties with Russia, who's a nuclear superpower, who is buying arms from Iran. In fact, Iran might as well be a subsidiary of Russia at this point in time when it comes to military equipment manufacturing. I mean, they're supplying them with drones, with missiles, with all kinds of stuff. So, moving on from there. Let's see here. Okay, so Florida Sheepdog, biggest this week. We will be talking about the NATO exercise, I promise you. Yeah, okay. Here's what I want you to consider as well. This goes into the idea that they're demonstrating their capabilities right now. But it also, not only is it demonstrating their capabilities and possibly trying to prop them up in the sense of like working with other countries, Russia, North Korea, China possibly, who knows, right? But what I will say is that this could also be opposition basically trying to emote the idea that they are a huge threat that needs to be stopped before they become more of a threat, right? So look at it through both lenses. They could be easily trying to present themselves as having advanced in technology and having more capability, which would make them more feared in the sense of what they're capable of. But also look at it through the lens of, would this create a situation where attacking them would be reasonable, right? Okay. This is an interview. Iran strikes in Iraq, Syria, and Pakistan raise tensions in the fraught region. NPR's Scott Simon asks the Atlantic Council's Masoud Mostajabi about Iranian strikes in northern Iraq and Pakistan and about tensions in that region of the world. Pakistan is a nuclear country. So is India. They have issues. But now Pakistan is responding to attacks from Iran in their territory and attacking Iran on their territory. This is not a good situation, okay? Let's see here. So what set off these strikes? So this week's attacks in particular were likely to have been both an aggressive demonstration of Iran's technological advances, particularly its expansive missile arsenal and fleet of drones, and a reminder that it is a regional power with a clear willingness to strike, particularly having itself just witnessed major terror attacks in the city of Kerman, separatist attacks in the southeast region of the country, the death of a high-level IRGC commander in Syria, and several other fatalities among senior acts of resistance associates. More so, I think Iran's willingness to strike what it considers its adversaries is partly a venting of anger, partly a warning, and partly a sales pitch to its current and future customers. There's a need to question whether they might have chosen to carry out all of these strikes to test some of their more advanced missiles under combat conditions, for example, and or to send a message to Israel and the West, or potentially do both. You mentioned a sales pitch for Iran to be able to sell their arsenal internationally, not intentionally. All right. Right. The standard missiles that Iran provides groups like Ansar Allah in Yemen or the Houthis or Hezbollah in Lebanon, when combined with drones, can overwhelm air defenses. But the missiles that were used, in particular in Syria, what is they call Khaybar Shakan, sets itself apart from these other systems because of the greater range and higher accuracy than previous Iranian missiles. Solid propellant precision missile, 1,400 plus kilometer, about 900 miles, making capable of reaching Israel. And an actual strike makes a point that, just to forgive me, a traditional sales pitch wouldn't. Yeah, the view from Tehran striking in Syria was to both threaten and display to Israel and the West these weapons capabilities. And so, given the fact that, for example, the Russians are buying a number of drones that they're using in their own theater in war against Ukraine, this is just an area for them to be able to display their technological advances in this field, both, again, in drones and in their missile systems. So, they are increasing capability. They are expanding their area of operation, and they're being labeled a threat to a different degree, a much more threatening entity now than before. So I question a lot of this information, not in the sense of its credibility, but in the sense of its purpose, right? So we're being told all this for a reason. It's not just solely to be like, look how good Iran is, right? It's to let you know that they're a problem that may have to be solved because they're getting out of hand, right? They're getting too many capabilities. And Israel, we all know, is more than willing to do a preemptive strike. So just be aware of all this, but Iran is the new boogeyman. And just to go back about that CNN article we started off with, where they talked about the base attack that happened, that left 2 U.S. service members with traumatic brain injuries. I mean, this was a serious attack. You can't just let attacks like this happen continually without a response. Like, this is a real problem. American soldiers are reportedly wounded in attacks allegedly by Iran-linked groups as fears grow of a wide regional conflict. Just because they're Iranian-linked doesn't mean it's past us that it's Iran who's funding it and providing the intel in order to pull it off. Iran-backed armed groups have targeted U.S. troops in Iraq hours after Tehran vowed revenge and blamed Israel for a deadly attack on a building housing its elite forces in the Syrian capital, Damascus, driving fears of wide regional conflict. The attack caused 1 Iraqi and possible American casualties, the U.S. Central Command said on Saturday, and came hours after Tehran vowed to take revenge against Israel for its strike targeting the IRGC in Syria. Multiple ballistic missiles and rockets were launched by Iranian-backed militants in western Iraq, targeting al-Assad Air Base, CENTCOM said on X. Most of the projectiles were intercepted by the base's air defense systems, but others impacted on the base, the statement said. This can't just continue on. We can't just keep absorbing missile attacks at our bases. And regardless of the validity of our bases being all over the planet and being in places that they might not need to be, or obviously painting themselves as a target based on location, regardless of that, if you're going to have a military presence and you're going to support the troops who are there, which you are supposed to protect to the best of your ability, you can't just allow continual missile strikes to keep happening on our bases. That's just unacceptable. So that leads us towards further action. And we know Iran is doing this. It's just being done through their proxies, much like Russia is aware of the fact that much of what Ukraine is doing is through us, right? They're our proxy, basically, in that arena. So there's not a good way that this ends. Like, it doesn't end well. And everything is pointing to Iran being the target. Not necessarily the... well, they're definitely the protagonist, but they're also being targeted and possibly baited for all I know. But what I can say is that it highly looks like we will end up in a physical altercation with Iran directly at some point this year. And in fact, I would like everybody to let me know in the chat if you think that's reasonable or not. So let's see here. Let's get a little poll going. We can do that because I have powers. Or do I have powers? Maybe I don't have powers. Come on, I can do a poll. There we go. Will we be in conflict with Iran this year? All right, you guys let me know what you think, because I appreciate the other insight. I need to be checked sometimes, okay? Derek Boodle, have I considered a haircut? No, I haven't, because my hair is actually pretty awesome. So we're just going to roll with it for now. Plus, I'm also trying to get a role as a wizard or possibly a biblical character in some kind of a show or movie. So we'll see how that goes. But if you know anybody, let them know. Now, here's the thing. We have a lot going on in this country. This whole Iran thing can blow up real fast. They're already dealing with Pakistan. They're already dealing with everything else that's going on. I mean, this whole thing is just talking about how they've launched at each other based on militant groups who are in the regions, who they're blaming for other attacks and everything else that occurred. I was going to go over this article and everything, but in reality, like, this is all you need to know. Iran-Pakistan attacks, and could the conflict escalate? The answer is yes. And the fact that Iran and Pakistan are currently exchanging military action should concern everybody, especially because of Pakistan's capabilities regarding, nuclear weaponry. Now, let's move a little bit away from the Middle East. I think it's a good idea. Grisio Nemo, you thought I was trying to grow a mullet. Yeah, I might already have one, to be honest. So, Mark with the mouth. I do not dye the front white. It is literally just that way. It grows that way, which is one of the few reasons why I don't want to cut it, because I think it's kind of sweet, to be honest. And in case anyone doubts that, you can just look at my scalp. I'm not seeing any roots there, man. So, all right. It comes up so often, I just address it now, because why not? Although I do still get comments regularly on videos that say things along the lines of, I hate your hair. Well, that's great. It's literally just my hair. I don't know what else to do about it. So anyway, let's see here. Yep, NATO. What are we doing with NATO? Well, first off, I thought this was interesting, and I wanted to share it with everybody. There's been a leak going around, right? Now, this is obviously a biased article from within the country that it would portray as being the problem here. But why I wanted to go over this was because I think it's worth at least considering this possibility. There was a leaked document that came out of Germany that basically exposed like all the war plans for 2024 and 2025 that showed like the anticipation of Russia's actions, and then like the fall of Ukraine, and then NATO mobilizing like 300,000 troops in 2025, and then a war between NATO and Russia occurring, right? Like it was like this whole thing. I don't know if leaked plans are legit or not. Like, I don't have that level of resources. But what I do know is that they can just as easily be fake as much as they can be real. And so I just wanted to share that perspective, and I thought it was interesting just to kind of see it from the other side, okay? NATO countries are persistently promoting the idea about Russia's imminent attack on Europe. They also want the Europeans to be prepared for a large-scale war with the Russians. According to the Bundeswehr documents that German tabloid Bild exposed on January 15th, the war may begin in the summer of 2025. However, representatives of EU military and civilian authorities later said that all that could be an option for the development of events, a fictitious scenario, or probable future. Noteworthy, the German military thus believe that Ukraine will finally lose in 2024 and cease to exist as a sovereign state. Bild readers wrote in comments to the article, like under Hitler, only with a nuclear weapon. It is believed that Russia will begin a new wave of mobilization and recruit another 200,000 people in February 2024. I guess we'll find out next month. In spring, the Russian armed forces will push the Ukrainian army back and launch massive cyber attacks and other forms of hybrid warfare in the Baltic countries in July. I mean, if this is all true, it'd be interesting to watch it unfold in real time based on this prediction. The Baltic states will continue their discriminating policies against the Russian-speaking population. By October, part of the troops will be redeployed to Kaliningrad to kick off a border conflict in the area of the Suwalki corridor. The Russians will capture the corridor, and those obtain direct access to Kaliningrad. I don't think that was a correct sentence, but I read it the best I could. This scenario implies that Russia will, with the support of Belarus, will reproduce the situation of 2014 on NATO territory. The alliance will react in May of 2025 and transfer 300,000 troops, including 30,000 Germans, to the eastern flank. It is worth noting that anti-war sentiments are strong among the population of all EU countries, especially Germany. However, the German authorities want to play the card of war with Russia in order to divert attention from internal problems. Interesting take. Now, like I said, I can't verify any of this stuff, but I find it interesting. Listen to this. The United States regularly conducts military exercises where U.S. soldiers try to capture Moscow. Germany also wants to train its military mind about the war with Russia, even though the last German warrior who wanted to make that happen was Adolf Hitler. According to the head of Stratcom, previous scenarios were completely fictitious with non-existent countries and geography, but nowadays they prefer to use real countries and geography. The rhetoric about Russia's impending attack on Europe has been used in history before. All the talking about the need to prepare for war with Russia emerges from the realm of the Third Reich that masterminded the attack on the USSR under the guise of the threat of such an attack from the Soviet Union. Therefore, Russia should not simply shrug such publications off. As history shows, the Europeans are serious and practical when it comes to war preparations. Interesting perspective. Like I said, very biased, of course, but also, at least in my opinion, somewhat reasonable, right? Like, you create this scenario, you tell everybody, here's the plans. This is what's going to happen. They're going to do it, so we got to get ready, and then we have to do what we got to do. And that's how you try to convince a population that going to war is the only way. And whether or not it's valid or not, either way, this doesn't sound good. It's either true, and all of it's going to happen the way they say it will, and that means war with Russia, or it's not true, which means they're trying to promote the concept of war with Russia, which eventually will lead to war with Russia. I don't like any of it. Let's see, 88%, it keeps shifting between the two. Here in the chat believe that war with Iran will happen this year. Feel like that's not good. Be prepared. How do you feel about all these higher-ups talking about prepping? I think that it goes back to what we said earlier in the conversation tonight. Once things go mainstream and you have all these people starting to really promote the concept, it kind of telegraphs what they're planning, right? Because then if things really fall apart due to military action of some kind, they'll have the fallback to say, well, we did warn you that this could happen. We told you to prepare. We wanted you to prepare, but you weren't able to prepare because we ruined your economy before you were capable of doing so. And now you're suffering, and we're sorry. We're going to do the best we can. But, of course, the only way for us to help you is to put you into our government program permanently. So we apologize, and, of course, we will need some conscriptions in order to afford all of the necessities your family will require. And since we are in a worldwide conflict, anyone between, 16 and 65 is eligible, right? Anyway, I don't know what, those things just exist in my mind for some reason. I'm not sure why. AJ Rodriguez says Rick Ross says he's getting into underground bunker business. He did say that. That's very interesting, but also Rick Ross, he likes to fly. That's what I know about him. So anyway, oh man. If my buddy Box only heard that line, I would definitely get a phone call about it. Moving on. Is NATO preparing for war with Russia? I think it's possible. Steadfast Defender 2024. Bulgaria says NATO exercise aims to show it is ready to defend territory. Drill does not intend to have impact on war with Ukraine, according to Deputy Foreign Minister. Okay, well, what is Steadfast Defender? NATO's upcoming Steadfast Defender 2024 exercise, which will start later this month and run through May, aims to show Russia that the alliance is ready to defend its territory, Bulgaria's Deputy Defense Minister said on Sunday. NATO armed forces are sending a signal to Russia that we are ready to defend our country resolutely. NATO countries must take this threat seriously, modernize our armed forces, increase their readiness, and show determination. Only in this way can we dissuade an aggressor from such actions, Atanas Zaprianov told public broadcaster Radio Bulgaria. Zaprianov said it's a defense exercise and it does not intend to have any impact on Russia's war in Ukraine. The security grouping says Steadfast Defender 2024 will be the largest NATO exercise in decades, with 90,000 forces from all 31 allies and Sweden. It will demonstrate our transatlantic unity, strength, and ability to deploy forces rapidly across thousands of kilometers in any conditions, it said in a statement earlier this week. Russia launched its special military operation. Wait a second, where did we hear that earlier tonight? Special military operation? No big deal, who cares? In Ukraine in February 2022, Moscow says the West is conducting a hybrid war against Russia by backing Kiev through financial and military aid. That's interesting because Iran is backing the Houthis, Hezbollah, all these other groups, Hamas, with military aid and financial aid. So, I don't understand how they could come to that conclusion. But what I can say is that this is a huge exercise, and it seems like NATO might be concerned about what comes next, which I'm not a big fan of. So, We're down to 86% on the yes, Iran and the U.S. will be in a direct conflict this year. So I at least appreciate the 14% of optimists we have in this crowd, because there's a good chance it won't happen. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to argue that. I think that these things are very dependent, and timelines are impossible to predict, right? But it is interesting to see that the majority of people here in this chat tonight are in agreement that it's likely to occur. So I think that we collectively have that concern, which I think is a reasonable concern, especially because it's one thing to target Russia through proxy in Ukraine with military aid and funding and everything else, but it's another thing when we're talking about the Middle East, right? Because if there's anything the U.S. likes to do, it's start wars in the Middle East, at least since I've been born. So, I mean, it kind of just seems par of the course. Like, the economy's bad, we're not really sure how things are going, what we're going to do, so, like, let's just bomb a Middle Eastern country and invade it. Seems like a decent idea. And then we do. So, anyway, not saying that's going to happen. Steven Sue, thank you for the super sticker. I appreciate that. And make sure everybody understands, if you aren't prepared, make sure you take care of yourself first, right? I want to make sure everyone in here is as prepared as possible, but I also do appreciate the support. I really do. Derek Boodle, I do have shampoo and conditioner stockpiled. Not necessarily for my hair, but I do have that. So you know what? Because I'm well-rounded. I try to have a little bit of everything. The other thing to keep in mind is that I have, women in my family, so I believe they would like to probably wash their hair. Now the conditioner is based on circumstance, because, in a nuclear situation, you don't want to use conditioner. Be aware of that. In case you didn't know that, that's something you should be aware of. What is your camo pattern of choice in your home state, and what is your favorite camo pattern in general? Steven Sue, I think I'm basically moving most things over to multicam just because it seems to be suitable for most situations, or otherwise I need to wear over whites because, like right now, if I walked outside, it's just pure white everywhere you look. So multicam just kind of seems to do the job. I do have a full set of 511 G07. I like the G07 pattern. It actually works decent out here because of the lighter colored flakes within it. They kind of help blend during like the fall and like the brown months of the year. But what I also like about the G07 stuff, when I bought it anyway, is that it was being discontinued. So I got it for an extremely good deal. I think I got a full uniform basically in G07 for like, I think the total was like $90. So yeah, I like G07 because it was affordable. All right, so, but it actually blends pretty well too. And I have a video of that G07 actually. It's my video where I wear my overwhites. So I talk about camouflage and not being seen in SHTF. And it was where I got some overwhites to demonstrate in the snow, some camo wrap tape for my rifle. But then I also demonstrated that G07 pattern against the snow and white background to show how it just couldn't really be useful in that environment. Anyway, Mossy Oak, can't go wrong, Florida Sheepdog, especially in Florida. You're not wrong. Let's see here. Let's talk about America now. Because let's be honest, America is kind of important, especially like to me. I like America and I want it to continue. But at this rate, it's not going to continue very well unless something changes. What do I mean by that? Okay. Honorificable. If I was a Star Wars bounty hunter, I would hope to be Dash Rendar. So, everyone was asking about the southern border earlier. I also am concerned about the southern border. Cartel human smuggling business is turning entire border towns into war zones. This is a story from today. Oh, wait, no, yesterday. Sorry, I don't know what day of the week it is. And this is on Fox News. So, like, this is mainstream now, right? And I know they talk about the border, but the cartels turning towns into war zones is something we've talked about on this channel for quite some time. And now the mainstream media is just talking about it too. I find that interesting. Has it reached a point where you can't ignore it anymore? What happened? We went to a different story. I don't want to do that. Okay. Ciudad Juarez. Mexican drug cartels are making millions in profits from the hundreds of thousands, of migrants arriving at the U.S.-Mexico border and are now turning entire border towns into war zones. The money left by the migrants trying to get across the border wall from Mexico into the U.S. to criminal organizations that are charging to guide them across, extorting them or kidnapping them, is creating a multi-million-dollar illegal business. Now, the different criminal organizations operating across the border are fighting to death for a piece of the pie. From small towns like Sonoita, across the border from Lukeville, Arizona, to entire cities like Ciudad Juarez across the river from El Paso, Texas, different cartels are killing each other and challenging Mexican authorities to gain control of the smuggling routes. In a video from December 29th, shared online from Sonora in northern Mexico, an SUV with several armed men around it is set on fire during a violent gunfight between alleged members of a local criminal organization with ties to the Sinaloa cartel and the Mexican army, according to the local news outlets. The gunfight lasted for several hours, according to Sonora state authorities. The gunmen used AK-47s and AR-15s to fight authorities. After the gunfight, only 5 of over a dozen henchmen were captured, according to authorities. Several videos from the same gunfight were shared online by locals, where sicarios are seen firing their weapons at authorities, barely managing to stay put. The main international bridge between Sonoita and Lukeville remained closed for days after the incident, according to Customs and Border Protection authorities. This last one was probably the most publicized because the videos made it to mainstream news, but is not the first one. This is all because of the amount of migrants arriving to this town. Joel Perez, a local Sonoita resident, told Fox News Digital. I guess that's Joel? I don't know. I haven't seen that one, to be honest. A few weeks back, on December 4th, the same bridge was closed for a full day by U.S. authorities regarding a large number of migrants arriving at the border, overwhelming U.S. border authorities' capacities. Okay, so here's a big takeaway here. These are border towns right across the border that are war zones, that are basically separated by a bridge from the United States of America and the towns there over. So we're on the edge of a border war, and we're just letting it happen. But we can't just let, Houthis fire missiles at ships in the Red Sea. We can't just let Iran fund all these proxies and everything else they have going on, right? We can't just let that happen. We can't just let Russia invade Ukraine. We have to fund them, and we have to train them, and we have to provide them with equipment and everything else. And I understand all those things to a degree, right? You know what I mean. But we can't do anything about this. We can't do anything about open warfare on our border that's literally touching our towns. Okay. Well, all that's happening, so how do we respond to it? The federal government has the answer, as usual, actually. The Supreme Court allows Border Patrol agents to remove razor wire installed by Texas at the Mexico border. This is something to keep an eye on. Texas and the federal government do not get along very well, and they have not gotten along for a very long time. But this is where people are starting to step on each other's toes, and lines are being crossed, and Texas is putting their constituents first, and the federal government is putting their authority first. And this is problematic. 1, for the national security of our country, but 2, because states' rights are a thing. And if Texas is not being protected in the way that they should be, they have to take matters into their own hands, and now they're being told by the Supreme Court they can no longer do so. There's a lot of issues here, and Texas has threatened to secede from the nation more than once. So I expect this issue to grow. And one thing I would watch out for regarding Texas, and this is something I would definitely consider, especially if you live in Texas. I assume Texas is anticipating a leadership change in the White House come November, right? Well, January next year, but you know what I mean. If that change doesn't occur, for whatever reason, what will Texas do knowing they will not have any support from the federal government regarding this crisis? That is something I would definitely consider. The court weighed in on a dispute between the Biden administration and Republican Governor Greg Abbott, who installed the wire in an effort to prevent illegal border crossings, which, like the previous article said, is creating a multi-million-dollar smuggling industry, which has created a war zone in multiple border towns in Mexico that is eventually going to spill over here in the U.S. and already has in many ways. Okay? A closely divided Supreme Court on Monday allowed Border Patrol agents to cut through or move razor wire Texas installed on the U.S.-Mexico border as part of an effort by the state to prevent illegal border crossings. The court, on a 5-4 vote, granted an emergency request filed by the Biden administration, which had argued that Texas was preventing agents from carrying out their duties. The brief order noted that 4 conservative members of the 9-justice court would have rejected the government's request. They were Justice Clarence Thomas, Justice Samuel Alito, Justice Neil Gorsuch, and Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Okay. The Biden administration says the wire prevents agents from reaching migrants who have already crossed over the border into the U.S. Texas Governor Greg Abbott, a Republican, installed the razor wire near the Rio Grande at Eagle Pass as part of an operation to address illegal immigration that has brought the state into conflict with the Biden administration. Texas sued after the Border Patrol agents cut through some of the razor wire, claiming the agents had trespassed and damaged state property. Okay. Now, I don't necessarily think this is going well. I also would mention that it does seem that Supreme Court Justice Amy Barrett was not on the same page as her usual counterparts on this one. So when you see these types of things occur, just keep that in mind, especially when it comes to firearms rights. States' rights are extremely important, as we all know. And it seems that she has a different understanding as to how that should work compared to the other 4 that you would think she would usually vote with. So that's just a consideration to keep in mind. Now, here's another thing I want to let you know about, okay? Greg Abbott in Texas is dealing with this issue head on. But one of the things they've done in the past that is concerning and should keep your awareness high is the idea of busing migrants out of Texas into these other parts of the country. And a lot of people cheer this whole concept on. They say, hey, that's what you get New York City. That's what you get Chicago. That's what you get, California, all these places that want to have all these, sanctuary cities. Well, this is what you asked for, right? The problem with that is that we have this issue of spreading the problem around in an unmanageable fashion and then not knowing where some of these people end up. And some of these people are not just immigrants from Latin America. Some of these people have an agenda and are here for nefarious reasons. So that's why this is a very dangerous scenario. And we also need to keep in mind that, I think today I even just saw a video of a guy who was crossing the border who was, from what I could tell, probably not of Latin descent, who was saying, if you don't know my name, you will soon, right? Why would someone be saying that as an illegal immigrant who's here to make a better life for themselves? Maybe he's a very confident person that thinks he's going to make it rich and get famous or something. Possibly. But I have a feeling that it's more than that. So that's where we're at. The border is not secure, which means the country is not secure, which means we are infiltrated. I don't know how else to say it. And cartels, they operate with impunity because in many ways they are immune. Do you think that your small town police force of 6 or 7 officers could actually take on an organized cartel unit? They're not even as well funded as that organized cartel unit. They make $48,000 a year to be a police officer, to deal with the worst part of your community and to risk their life if something were to happen. I mean, supposedly they don't have to, but some of them would. I know some of them would. But what I'm saying is that they make, $48,000 a year, which these days is barely livable, right? In many ways when it comes to how our world is going, and especially when it comes to trying to raise a family. And you think that they're going to be able to go up against a well-funded and organized cartel unit that has multi-billion-dollar backing? You really should consider that. Now, and just so everybody knows, you guys are more than welcome to speculate on that video I was referring to, but it is interesting. Okay. Now, what else is happening here in this country? Here's a big one. It's concerning, and it reminds you that you're the problem, and that's why it's upsetting to me. There's nobody. I have no ill will towards our country and our people, right? And every day I find myself meeting someone else that I, never planned on meeting, a customer service associate or somebody, working at the grocery store, something like that, where you just have that quick, small talk interaction. And you never know what their background is or how they vote or what their religion is or any of that stuff, right? But what I do know is that I generally have a pleasant interaction that ends with two people who go on their way without any negative feelings towards each other, right? Which is what America's supposed to be. There's a reason why we used to not talk about politics. There's a reason why you didn't used to talk about who you voted for. It's because we wanted to maintain our cohesiveness as a country and as a culture, to be able to say hi to our neighbors without being upset about the fact that they, have weird ideologies or whatever. But that's not the country we're in anymore. But we're the problem. And I guarantee you I'm not the problem. And I guarantee you anyone in this chat's not the problem unless you're specifically here to be a troll. And even then you're not the problem, because thanks for artificially pumping up the channel, right? But what I will say is that I'm really sick of being considered the problem. And like there's no one else in this country is going to be, less of a problem than me. Like I'm not a problem. I just paid the IRS a ridiculous amount of money because I had to. Well, I guess I didn't technically have to, but I did because that's what they wanted me to do, and I just don't want to deal with them in any other capacity. So here's the money I owe you for these taxes, right? Like, this is just what we do. Like, I pay my registration, I don't go to jail, like all those things. But here we are. So, Senate Republican demands answers from Treasury on push for banks to surveil customer transactions in 2021. Feds asked banks to search private transactions for terms like MAGA, Trump, and purchases of religious texts to turn over to law enforcement. The top Republican of the Senate Banking Committee is demanding answers from the Treasury Department and its Financial Crimes Enforcement Division after the revelations the agencies urged private financial institutions to surveil private transactions using politically charged search terms to flag customer profiles to federal law enforcement. Senator Tim Scott penned a letter to Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and FinCEN Director Andrea Gacki on Friday after Fox News Digital exclusively reported that agencies suggested in 2021 that banks use specific search terms to query transactions, including MAGA, Trump, Biden, and more, along with merchant codes from specific sporting goods stores. I am regarding recent reporting that the U.S. Treasury Department, through its Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, urged private financial institutions to surveil customers' transaction-level data using politically charged search terms in order to flag certain customer profiles on behalf of federal law enforcement. Scott wrote in the letter obtained by Fox News Digital, "These allegations, if true, represent a flagrant violation of Americans' privacy and the improper targeting of U.S. citizens for exercising their constitutional rights without due process." Scott pointed to the Fox News Digital report, which revealed that FinCEN provided materials to financial institutions instructing them to search and filter Americans' financial data using keywords and search terms as well as merchant category codes to aid law enforcement in identifying persons of interest ahead of January 20th, 2021 inauguration, weeks after the J6 Capitol riot. The terms and codes were discovered as part of a House Judiciary Committee and Subcommittee on Weaponization of the Federal Government investigation. The committees obtained documents indicating that MCC codes were used to query transactions like 3484, small arms, 5091, sporting and recreational goods and supplies, and the keywords Cabela's, Dick's Sporting Goods, and Bass Pro Shops, among others. Now, first off, I don't know why they added Dick's Sporting Goods in on that one because, does anyone go there for that stuff anymore? I mean, they really screwed up when it came to their thought process on what kind of firearms they were willing to sell. So, yeah, I don't really think that one is a big threat for them. But anyway, the House Judiciary Committee also obtained documents revealing that FinCEN warned financial institutions that an extremism indicator could be the purchase of books, including religious texts like the Bible, and subscriptions to certain media containing extremist views. I wonder what kind of media they would be considering. I would almost guarantee you InfoWars was on that list. These allegations are particularly concerning given past efforts to weaponize the financial system and payment activity against politically disfavored lawful activity, Scott wrote. Under the Obama administration's Operation Choke Point initiative, the Department of Justice coordinated with federal financial regulators to intimidate financial institutions into denying services to legitimate businesses that the administration was ideologically opposed to, including gun retailers. Scott said that the weaponization and misuse of MCC codes is not a new issue either, saying members of Congress have recently raised concerns about the potential to surveil the free exercise of lawful activity using an MCC code. The same concern is at issue here. The federal government efforts to target individuals and entities based on their political views is a blatant and egregious violation of our Constitution, Scott wrote. Additionally, reported actions like these disrupt confidence in federal law enforcement and raise significant questions regarding the independence of federal financial regulators. It sure does hurt confidence in federal law enforcement. It sure does hurt all of their credibility and reputation, and it definitely makes you wonder if there's any reason to fall in line at a certain point, because you can do everything right your entire life, but turns out you're Christian and you bought a Bible, and now you're being surveilled because you might be a crazy person. You might be doing crazy stuff. For example, I literally got asked in my last live stream, like, what's up with all the rainbow color in the background, which, by the way, is just to make the viewing of this a little bit more enjoyable or I don't know, comfortable, whatever you want to call it, right? But I just responded, it's because I just really like Noah's Ark, right? So, but there we go. I'm on a list now because I mentioned a biblical story. Look, we know we're the problem. We know we're on a list. We know that the powers that be consider people who prefer self-reliance to be problematic. I can guarantee you we're not problematic yet. But it's very unfortunate that someone like myself, many of you here in the chat, pretty much 100% of you, are being labeled as a potential threat or risk when we're the ones who likely care the most about this country, right? When we're the ones who are probably some of the most pleasant people when we're out in the public and are willing to help others if something occurs, right? I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's just very frustrating. I'm very, very sick of it because we're jumping through hoops constantly to try to maintain a level of compliance just to be told that, we're a problem, right? So, let's see here. Green Greg's, good to see you. I appreciate the information you share. I really do. I think it's really good stuff. Are you getting most of your news videos demonetized? YT is hitting me hard. Here's the thing. The news videos, it just really depends on the subject, it seems. And I agree with you. It is a problem. But I will share your channel here in the chat. If you guys don't know Green Greg's, he's got a lot of good information that you should definitely look into, especially, let's just say, about things that float the sky. You might learn a lot. So no worries, Green Greg's. But yeah, the information specifically seems to be very dependent on how it's presented, right? And then the other thing is that there's certain parts of the world right now that you have to talk about in a certain way, or else you won't talk about it. So there's a lot of that going on. Now, Luke B, it's better just to assume you are. So there you go. I helped you out. Honorifical, why are we problematic? We aren't, but we're being told we are. Well, actually, we're not being told we are. The people who think we're all, or who already think we're problematic, are being told we are. So that way, they have more fuel for the fire to keep going in the direction they're going, because they think that people like us want to impose our will upon them, persecute them, whatever it might be, to create that division and that divide and create that internal enemy so that there is no unanimity. There's no cohesion. There's no uniting together. There's no America. In a way, America as a country, as one country, is great. America as two countries is not great. And that's basically what they've tried to create. And you know what happens when you have two countries in one country? It can't progress. In fact, it generally devolves into something much worse. but at the very least, it can't move forward. It takes one country to move forward as a country. Judy Good says, divide and conquer, a very old strategy. And 100%, it is exactly what it is. So, hopefully this was good information for everybody tonight. I do have my private members-only live stream going on right after this one. If you want to be a part of that, YouTube channel members and Subscribe-Star members are welcome to come. It's just a benefit of supporting the channel in that fashion, so I appreciate that. I will put a link to the Subscribe-Star in the live chat right now. It's also in the description, and it will be in the pinned comment in case you're interested in that. It's $5 a month, so if you can't swing it, I get it. Totally understandable, and I don't expect anyone to actually do it. But for those who have decided it was worth their time, try to provide some value, and I also do these private live streams as just a way to say thank you. So thank you all very much for being here. I really appreciate it. Hang in there. Do the best you can. And just remember that we're not scared of these events that are occurring. They're not something you have to worry yourself with on a daily basis. You have to insert them into your preparedness plans. You have to insert them into your strategy. And then you have to decide what your reaction will be if something likely or probable based on our current risk factor happens. Now you know how to react to it properly. So, Hunter Wells, thanks for joining the membership. I really appreciate it. So, and if you want to go to that live chat tonight, Hunter Wells, the link is on the community page on my channel page. So if you go to the community tab, you'll see a post there that's posted for members only, and there will be a link there for you. So thank you all very much. I really appreciate everybody that's here. Anything else you need from me, go to magicprepper.com. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.